in advance. All right, cool. Got it. Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today I'm joined by Kyle Harris from the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. Kyle, it's a pleasure having you on, sir.
Yeah, well, I thank you for the opportunity to come on. I'm always looking for different ways to connect with folks that are, looking to be a part of this program, whether that's through a license or just as a consumer or somebody who's interested or folks that are naysayers and just want to know more. So appreciate the opportunity.
Cool. And I just want to say to everyone that may be watching this, you guys did a great job keeping the comments respectful for Julie, which I really appreciate. And I'm going to ask you to do the same here. I know that, and Kyle, I want to say to you, some of these questions I'm going to ask are definitely stuff that needs to be taken up with the legislature, but I'm still getting a lot of questions in this alley, and people are really curious to hear your opinion.
Sure.
So
I'll give it. I'll give it where I can. And it's one of the, constant things that we need to continuously do is remind folks and educate folks, whether it's, Schoolhouse Rock, if we think about those kind of tools that we use as children, to just remind folks, because I hate constantly having to say, that's not my problem, take it up with the legislature, because it looks like I'm punting the question. And I don't want to have to do that, but sometimes I'm forced to do that. So,
sure.
But part of our job is educating folks on how you facilitate change. And some of that's through conversations with us. Some of that's through how we work with the legislature, but a lot of that is how, folks work with their elected officials.
Sure. Now, before we get into anything serious, I'd like to get your 5-minute life story, if that's okay with you, get a little background.
Yeah. So I grew up in Maryland. I'm sure some folks may just hit the stop button right there and not want to hear anything more from me about that. But I grew up in Maryland on a farm on the eastern shore of Maryland, very rural area. I get better internet at my house in Vermont than I do where I grew up, which is curious in a way. I'm only an hour and a half, I guess, from DC, but it feels a lot further than that. I went to college in South Carolina at the College of Charleston. I grew up sailing competitively. That was what I found myself to be good at. Did that in college. We won a national championship my freshman year. That was really fun, but I got tired of being drug tested and workouts. Like, I'm not the workout king over here every morning at 7 a.m. I wanted the more traditional college experience. And so I stopped doing that. I kind of started to figure out what my interests were. Growing up around water and around agriculture, really kind of, I found myself really interested in issues surrounding the environment and agriculture. And I remember calling my father my senior year of college and was like, "Hey, Dad, I want to switch to an environmental science degree." And at the time I was a history major, and he said, "That's great, Kyle." He was helping me with college at the time. I'm fortunate to have that, from my parents. And he was like, "But I'm not paying for anything more than 4 years." So I got the history degree. And trying to really understand what I was interested in, recognizing I had a history degree and a classical civilizations minor, which, unless I wanted to be a professor, what good does that really do you in the real world? I think folks sometimes, college is antiquated in a sense, because you really don't find what you want to do, typically through the traditional college path, unless you're one of those folks that know it, or just get a business degree and figure it out that way. So I found the Vermont Law School focus on environmental law and environmental policy, and I became really interested in that program. And the first time I came to Vermont was in 2012. I just fell in love with the way things are done here, the folks here, the type of activism, I guess, for a lack of a better way to describe it, up here. What folks felt passionately about, I kind of really connected with. And so I went to Vermont Law School. I got a JD there. I have a master's in environmental policy as well, focusing in water resource law.
Cool.
And so I was able to kind of really find what I wanted to do, even though I had a history, degree. And I was looking at ancient civilizations and stuff. It's completely different from what I find myself doing these days in a sense, but after law school, I didn't have the linear linear path that most folks associate with law school. I moved back to Maryland because I didn't have a job. I took the bar exam in Maryland, so I'm a licensed practitioner in the state of Maryland. I moved into a small apartment with my then girlfriend, now wife, and I was working in a sushi restaurant, delivering sushi on a moped, commuting to DC, and working for a small nonprofit for free, just to try and find a path. You know what I mean? And that was only 7 or 8 years ago, I guess. So at the time, I was like, I can't do this. I spent all this money on my education. I mean, my parents helped me out with undergrad, but nothing past that. So I have all this debt. You know, was it worth it? I don't know what I want to do. I don't know how I can really break into this industry, into any industry. And I took an internship with a trade association in DC that works in the ag world. And I did well in that internship. They offered me a energy efficient over here at the Cannabis Control Board. So we had these audit lights. I found myself, you know, in a job managing and then directing the environmental affairs for about 14% of the U.S. corn supply. A lot of folks really ask me, you know, given what my interests are, given my background, my value set, my interests, why the hell would you go work for big ag or big corn? And I wrestled with that decision quite extensively in my head for a long time. But at the end of the day, I kind of made the decision I'd rather be in the boardroom helping influence the direction of a market versus, you know, they got so much money, they can swat away like mosquitoes a lot of the lawsuits that are coming in their direction. And so I thought I could facilitate change from the inside out. And I did think I was semi-successful in doing that in my short time, but moving those big industries is like turning an aircraft carrier. It's methodical. Sure. It takes a lot of time. It's a challenge, but we launched a lot of things that, you know, I was proud of there. We launched something called the Plant-Based Products Council, which is like a feedstock agnostic look at different bioproducts out there and how we can look to replace traditional petrochemicals. Not just in things like packaging, which I think I would expect you might have some questions about that.
Sure, yeah.
But also like, you know, how we can look at, you know, other things that bio products can look to, you know, act from that polymer perspective, the same way that we use, you know, more traditional plastics. You know, I helped rehabilitate habitat for monarch butterflies across the Midwest. You know, that's their home habitat. The Corn Belt has been, you know, obviously those habitats have been affected by corn production. And so we were looking to get, you know, rebuild a lot of that stuff. I helped incentivize and encourage a lot of big industrial processes across the Midwest to update their CO2 scrubbers at the top of their smokestacks and stop relying so much on coal-based fuels, and looking at bioenergy and how to take that carbon and actually turn it into something versus, you know, just releasing it back into the atmosphere. So I was doing a lot of really, you know, cool and technical stuff. I was working within the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act from a legal perspective. It was a lot of hard work. I will say that, but I kept thinking to myself, like, you know, I'm in DC, I'm meeting with all these people. Is DC the right place for me and the way I like to operate? I got tired of the rat race pretty early on, and I wasn't feeling like the impact of what I was doing from a policy perspective in my community. You know what I mean? In DC, in the Beltway, you know, everybody's got their jokes and rightfully so to an extent. But I wasn't feeling what I was doing because I was so in that world. And I, you know, I had always had in the back of my mind, you know, my wife's also apolitical. She doesn't engage, which, you know, is great, quite honestly. But we were trying to find a different place to go than DC. She's from New Jersey originally. She had been in Vermont with me my last year of law school. And, you know, I kind of sent some soft applications to the Agency of Agriculture. You know, I had a lot of conversations with different folks at the Agency of Agriculture from the top down to the director level on, hey, we want to figure out a way to utilize your skill set. You know, we really need a more policy, emerging issue, economic focus at the Agency of Agriculture as we try to, as that agency, not we anymore, try to really look at where ag has been and how it's going to transition, considering how consumers look at, feel about, ingest a lot of agricultural products these days, more so in a different way than they did maybe 20 or 30 years ago. So, I took a leap of faith and moved back to Vermont. I moved to Montpelier, and I was an ag development specialist with the Agency of Ag, focusing on economic issues, or emerging issues in economic development. And what I really did was I had an office at ACCD and at Ag, and I was really just helping ensure that the conversations at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development had ag representation up there, and making sure that a lot of the money at that time, before COVID, a lot of the money is often routed through ACCD for the state and for grant programs. And how can we get more of that money invested into our working lands and folks that are actually on the front lines of trying to, they really are the ones that, give Vermont that sense of culture and the food quality that we really see and people talk about all over the country, right? So I was focusing in dairy innovation. I ran all the maple syrup, maple production grants for the agency for about a year and a half.
Good.
And I was, so they get a lot of grants through USDA to do maple education, updates, that sort of thing, marketing dollars for folks. So I was working closely with them and the Vermont Maple Sugar Makers Association. And I also was working with hemp, and I think, I know there's a lot of folks, and this might lead to some more of your questions, Caleb, and I know this is a long intro. Folks were wondering.
No, take your time, man, please.
Folks were wondering when Julie James and I got on the board, like, who the heck are these people?
I sure was.
And rightfully so. And I think, it's funny, COVID kind of interrupted my career trajectory in a way, because I took the job right around Labor Day. And so by the time I got my feet wet in the office, the hemp growing season was kind of wrapping up. I was talking with folks in the processing and storage world over those cold winter months. But I was gearing up to start going out with Mike, the hemp inspector, to hemp businesses, right before COVID. We were gearing up to do that for the growing season, because I was going to go out with Mike while he inspected plants, and I was going to talk about business and business development with folks that were, growing hemp for CBD purposes or maybe some industrial purposes.
Like a ride along with the cops, huh? You're just like learning and sort of.
No, well, I think, learning about plants, sure. But I was going to ask folks, how can the state support your business? What kind of support do you need? Do you need business support? Do you need cultivation expertise? Do you need integrated pest management plan expertise? How can we start developing grants and opportunities for your business to succeed versus just your ability to grow, the plant at a high quality level, but on scale, right? So but COVID hit. Given my background, they kind of pulled me into helping translate federal dollars into state programs, because, the federal government is going to audit every state agency across the entire country that gets COVID relief dollars to make sure that money is being spent the way the federal government wanted it to be spent. So we had to develop programs overnight, launch these programs. We handed out an incredible amount of grants and forgivable loans to a lot of folks, in the ag space. And I never really got to do, just because the state really stopped and, being out in the field during COVID for such a long time, I never really got to meet the people that I was hoping to meet. You know what I mean? So, but I was, if folks are watching, you might have gotten some hemp surveys about how much money you were getting per percent of CBD and all this other stuff. And I was the one that you were probably angry at getting these surveys. I was the one sending that out to kind of understand the market. And a lot of that work just stopped because I was focusing on other stuff because of where we were in the pandemic. And then, Act 164 was passed without the governor's signature, and there started to be calls for, applications to be considered by the nominating committee. And I quite honestly wasn't really planning on submitting my information initially. I think I'm only 32. I didn't know if they would think I was at a point in my career that they would feel comfortable kind of giving me an opportunity to kind of shape the market as I saw that was necessary for a variety of different reasons. But I had a lot of folks at Ag kind of say, hey, Kyle, this looks like it's right up your alley. And maybe that's part of my personality or what my interests are, but also my background, I don't know. And, I kind of hit the submit button at 11 p.m. on New Year's Eve, it was due on New Year's Eve. So, and then, I kind of just, it was a long, arduous process to kind of get a seat at the board. And we can talk about that. I'm sure you've got questions. But I just kept getting another email or another call, and, I kind of fell up a little bit, if you know what I mean.
Let me ask you this, Kyle. Did you guys have to go through the same background testing that the licensees are undergoing now?
Did I have to do an FBI supported background check? No, I did not.
Okay. I was just curious.
No, I mean, there's some protections for state employees, out there as it relates to drug testing, and I'm sure that they call it around references, and, they might do those background screenings, but a background check like we require folks. And again, like, working for a state agency isn't the same as touching and selling and producing something that's federally illegal. So,
sure.
So no, I did not have to do the same rigmarole in a certain sense that folks are currently experiencing right now.
Now, let me ask you this, because you mentioned on the phone that you're a home grower. Can we talk about that? Is that allowed?
I got a couple plants going.
Yeah.
I'm trying to put. Sorry,
go ahead.
I just, I have a little homestead. Not that I'm trying to make any money off of it. I think, my wife and I are just, earth to the ground people, and are trying to, see how well we can do at certain things. Am I like putting a lot of my time and energy, like am I going to grow a good quality plant? I don't fucking know. So, but I'm going to, I figured
I'd like to see.
I like to think, I'm always the type of person, if I'm going to jump into something, I want to be able to understand it from a variety of different ways. Right. So yeah, I got a couple plants going, nothing that's illegal. So, and we'll see how it shakes out.
So what is your preferred method of growing?
I don't think I'm I don't think I have the experience to really get wonky about it right yet. I have I have a hoop house. It would be considered an outdoor grow based on our regulations. I put a plant in the ground, I water it a lot, and I'm looking out for certain pests, and I'm letting it rock. I'm really not tinkering a lot because I want to kind of just get.
Go ahead.
No.
I was wondering what kind of seeds you get, or where you get your genetics from.
I won't answer that question directly. But I got some good, I think, some good outdoor plants rocking. So we'll see how they do. I've got friends and colleagues around the state, and that I don't want to put their name out there, but also around the country. So I got a lot of I got a lot of friends working in this space. I'm not just a robot in Montpelier with these fancy things on the wall here. Trust me.
So I also wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you recently attended a cannabis regulators conference in Washington State.
That is correct.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what goes on at those things.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for regulators from all states that have an adult use program or a medical program or both to kind of talk through issues that they, every state program is different, but a lot of them have the foundational aspects of the most mature markets, like an Oregon or a Washington or a Colorado or a California. And, one of my thoughts leading that is Vermont is doing things a lot differently than a lot of these other states, in a more forward thinking way. A lot of states get so bogged down and the bureaucratic nature of state government or litigation or just having boards that are risk averse, that they don't really want to try and push the envelope. Folks are comfortable with the status quo until something happens at the federal level. And so one of my takeaways was, I'm proud of where Vermont is at this time. Obviously that's a 30,000 foot view, not necessarily where we are with licensure, but where the program is. And, some good connections. We've constantly been in contact with other states as we look to develop our rules, trying to pick their brains on what happened well, what didn't happen well. If you could go back, where would you start? How did you address this issue? And honestly, like, you know, a lot of them don't have, we've been trying to do this in a year. A lot of states that have been at it for 10 years still don't have the answers that you want. So it's not like a misery loves company type of thing necessarily, but elements of it for sure, because there's a lot of really challenging issues overlaid by the federal status that states are constantly having to worry about. But it's fascinating, you know, every state's different, every statute is different. You hear about these large raids and on illegal grows out west. And a lot of those control boards don't have jurisdiction over illegal grows. They just have jurisdiction over licensed grows. So that's law enforcement going out there.
Oh, okay.
Other reasons are, you know, water is traded like a commodity out west. And a lot of those illegal raids are for water purposes, not necessarily because it's an unregulated product being put into the marketplace. So understanding why things happen and how they happen differently on the East Coast versus the West Coast. And a lot of the Eastern states are trying to push this market into a different generation, quite honestly. And those states are learning from states like, maybe not Vermont, because we don't have the demonstrated success or the size, but like New Jersey's launching, New York's launching, and they're doing things differently. And Massachusetts has done some things differently. Maine is doing a lot of really cool things. But Maine's kind of unique because they're so county oriented versus how a lot of the other state programs on the East Coast, at least, are really coming together. So it's fascinating to just kind of learn. I will say that Vermont is unique. Our board is not this mythical ethos, risk averse board like other states experience. Listening to staffers of other states talk about their boards, you know, they talk about them like, you know, they rarely ever see them. So we just do things a lot differently here. You know, some of that's good, most of it's good, some of it's just different.
Now, you threw the word risk out there, and this is something I'd like to talk to you about, because you talked about this on the phone, about sort of insulating people from risk and sort of protecting them from themselves. Could you explain what you meant by that, please?
Yeah, you know, a lot of this is coming so fast and furiously at folks. And from my perspective, as somebody who, you know, has never operated in the legacy market as a cultivator, but has been in and around agriculture my entire career, I think it takes a couple different skill sets in order for someone to be successful at cannabis cultivation because of its federal status. That's probably somebody who is really good with these plants and understands how to get the most out of them while respecting the plant. Somebody who understands like broader, you know, diversified operations and has that farming background, but also somebody with a set of business skills, whether that's, you know, accounting or, you know, business planning, thinking about 5 years, 10 years down the road, gathering investors if you need them. There's so many skill sets that you need to be a successful business. And I think, you know, one of the things that's important for the board is not prioritizing, because we're trying to push in certain ways this market to look differently. You know, we don't want the FBI and the DOJ to kind of think, hey, this state is really, misunderstanding or, you know, not holding true to certain, you know, understandings that federal and state partnerships have. Like there's something called the FinCEN guidance and the Cole memorandum, and they list a certain set of priorities that states need to prioritize to not have the DOJ come in and prioritize your state for enforcement and civil asset seizure. So we've got to overlay those set of priorities and in making sure we can stand up foundationally a market that has public safety, that doesn't give out licenses to folks that have, you know, certain, you know, criminal background elements and incentivizing, you know, organized crime, so to speak. While also really just making sure that, you know, we can push the market how we want to push it and start, you know, hitting certain things. And so, you know, a lot of it even goes back to kind of your initial question, Caleb, about, I don't think this is, or your initial kind of reaction that I have some questions for you, but they're probably more in the legislative bucket, like farm gate sales and stuff like that. Like the
THC caps that I keep hearing about,
sure.
You know.
Well, yeah, now I'm going to focus at least on farm gate sales right now, because that is something that the legislature would have to do. But if we did that from the get-go, there could be certain risks associated that from a federal level saying, hey, this Vermont Control Board is not taking seriously certain elements that we're saying, because they're diverting so far away from the model that they're comfortable with in other states, that maybe we set folks up for failure, and that's not something we want to do. We want to insulate as much risk at the board for our licensees as we possibly can. And that extends also to how we work with other state agencies. Other state agencies are not wanting to be as forthcoming in working with us, because if they're working on cannabis, like so much of how state agencies operate, a lot of it is federal dollars. If they lose those federal dollars, they lose a lot of their ability to do their work. So
which other state agencies are you coordinating with, or trying to at least?
Yeah, like ACCD and BAFM are two of the major ones. Liquor and Lottery, we had discussions with them about, educational information. Like they provide, like you're a bartender, right? So I'm sure you and I've worked in liquor stores too. You've got to take classes to do ID checks and stuff like that. And at one time we were having conversations with DLL about, helping us with compliance and enforcement. That's not the direction that we're going, but even having those conversations, they go all the way to the top of a general counsel in an agency to make sure that everybody's on board, and including the governor's office, with us working with certain state agencies, because, is the risk that if they do that federal funding will be taken away. The risk is, that calculation, it's probably not going to happen, but if a different administration comes in at the federal level and they view cannabis completely differently, it's forward thinking and trying to protect, and insulate. So that's one of the, I think, benefits of having the board as its own separate entity, is because we are insulating risk. But a lot of what we do and the rigmarole that we ask folks to go through from a suitability perspective is also to protect themselves. And it's really hard. I'm in my seat, and I see what we're doing as something that's helping people. And I can appreciate how somebody on the other side of that equation, might feel like you're making this so challenging for me. And, it's more like I'm feeling this with my pocket right now. Like, you're putting a lot of pressure on me. And one of the hardest challenges of this job is recognizing that, having empathy, not sympathy, and really taking a step back and looking at, the road ahead. And that's one of the things that we've had to do as a board, and it's not always easy.
Yeah. And I can see that, I've certainly, a lot of people are bringing their frustration to me now to sort of convey it to you, which, some of it certainly seems justified. Some of it seems like maybe people have overextended themselves and have not quite, maybe just got put the cart before the horse, so to speak.
Yeah, I think people got really excited, and I'm happy that they're excited. I think we tried to stress to folks, hey, until you have a license, think about decisions that you're going to make. But I know that folks have emptied their savings accounts. They've emptied their 401ks. They've emptied their investment accounts because they're gearing up for something. And, and I can tell you at the board, like, our staff is working incredibly hard to get as many licenses out, but we've got to determine those suitability criteria so we don't prioritize the entire market for, federal enforcement and federal asset seizure. So, we never, I hate to say it like this, but we never guaranteed licenses would happen May 1st. We had a directive to start, that we could start handing them out May 1st. But legislative timelines in reality don't always line up, correctly.
Yeah, and you guys, you said you've been short-staffed. You guys are working weekends and overtime. What's the workload been like for you, Kyle?
Well, and you should ask one of my staff that question, because they're on the front lines. The board is kind of like big picture, and I can say my job, from my perspective, has changed every month since I started this job. And, we're kind of like a startup. Imagine doing a startup business overlaid with how slow government operates. And so we're trying to move fast, and we're a mighty little team. Like, I can't think of, in working with the federal government and working in other multiple agencies at the state level, nobody has settled into that, stereotypical bureaucratic kind of comfortability that you kind of hear about or you watch on Parks and Rec or something like that, right? So it's really, it's a small, mighty team. Everybody is working as hard as they can. There's staff working on weekends to try and push licenses out to get them ready for board review by our board meetings. But my job is changed dramatically each month. The first month, I'm not kidding when I say, because I've seen it picked up in some publications. Like the first month, it was James, Julie, and I, and that was it. And we had to figure out how to get phones because they didn't really give us advice at the Agency of Administration on how we get phones set up. Or I thought the Agency of Digital Services would set up our website if I told them what they wanted. And they said, no, here's a YouTube video. I can train you. You're going to set it up, and you've got to work with these set of parameters. So really? I was building a website, and I mean, I don't have that. I told you before when we had the Zoom snafu, I can maneuver around the internet, but I don't know how to build a website.
Yeah, and this is one thing I said to Julie is that the state is not particularly adept at getting the infrastructure set up. Like I watched what happened with the Vermont Health Connect website, and they spent $80 million on that, and it was a disaster when it rolled out. Yeah, and
I'm not throwing any of my other agency partners under the bus.
No,
but
let me do that. No, you don't.
No. It's funny because you expect things to happen a certain way, and then you see firsthand, oh my gosh, I'm the one responsible for getting this set up. And so, once we kind of got some type of foundation set under us from at least a feeling like a state agency perspective and having the tools we needed in order to hold meetings, we spent 3 months not even putting any pen to paper, really just talking to people, getting folks comfortable coming to our meetings and sharing their stories, because there's a lot of sensitive information that folks are sharing with us, from their life stories to their business situation, and getting them comfortable, everybody comfortable to continuously come and talk to us was something that we took very seriously, and that helped guide us into the regulatory process. And we've been an open book. And I think one of the things that's been challenging lately, for me at least, I can't speak for Julie and James, is we built a lot of really good relationships with a lot of prospective licensees who got comfortable texting me like you were this morning, or calling me or emailing me, asking me questions about rules. And now that we're in this part of our operation here where like I'm the one voting on whether or not somebody should have a license or not, and we're thinking about how we procedurally do that, and ethics and morals associated with that. How close am I to this person? We've really tried to put up some boundaries around the board and just communicate through staff, but we're short-staffed, as you know. And so I'm always one that wants to get in the mud and help. And sometimes as a board member, I'm still getting used to the fact that I'm not that person anymore.
Yeah, and it certainly seems like an interesting dynamic, having all these people and wanting to connect with them, but having to sort of also keep your board obligations in mind and interact in that way. That seems like it could be tricky.
It's a lot. And, the open meeting rules in Vermont are a lot different than in other states. That's another thing I found. Like, it's easy for people. If we had wanted to, we could have sat in a room together for a couple of weeks, meaning me, Julie, James, Bryn, our general counsel, and probably churned this thing out a lot quicker. But the public open meeting law requirements and the public engagement we wanted made the process, I think, stronger on the back end. It just took longer to get there, right? So because we didn't have a pride of ownership, like I think some folks at the legislature did over certain issues that you probably want to talk about. We were willing, once we drafted rules, to like really engage the public and have them say, hey, you did this wrong. This doesn't make sense. And we would consider whether or not we actually felt that way, and we would make changes accordingly. We didn't accept every single change that came our way, but we certainly accepted a lot of them. And that really helped us kind of move through two bodies called ICAR, which is the Intergovernmental Committee on Administrative Rules, and LCAR, which is the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, that really look to make sure that you have followed the directive of the statute and that your rules look like, what the statute outlines is something that you can do. But a lot of that is how much public opinion you took and comment you took on the rules that you're drafting. And we had a record that was extensive. I think there was over 100 pages of comments on our rules, and that really helped us justify a lot of decisions that we made.
Now, Kyle, I assume we're getting close to the 40-minute deadline here. You might have seen the thing pop up that says
well, you know, it's funny. This is my Zoom account, and I actually pay for Zoom, so we don't have to stop. We can keep going.
Oh, cool. Well, maybe we could take a break in a minute. And
Sure.
okay, cool. So that's beautiful. So let me ask you, how long would you say it takes to process an entire application?
You know, I'm not the one best suited to answer that. Probably, I think right now we've got, so I don't know. It's not like a linear, you know, process, because there's a lot of back and forth between the application or the applicant and our staff, depending on if something's missing or if something's not satisfactory or doesn't meet the rules. I would say, I don't know. I feel uncomfortable even putting a specific like hour amount on it.
Fair
I can
enough.
say we have one person that handles those right now for the most part, with some supplemental help from some other folks. But once we get, I think our pre-qualification window has closed. We're almost out of that backlog. And once we have that, we'll have more staff time to bring that hourly, you know, figure down. We're also really close to hiring a couple more licensing agents and a deputy licensing director.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I saw you guys were trying to bring on some extra help. Do you think it would have been helpful if that was set up sort of earlier? It seems like they've sort of waited to the last minute here, and
so
now we're in this crunch.
Honestly, like the authorizing legislation, if you look back at S1 or Act 164, I think the Cannabis Control Board was going to consist of 3 board members, an executive director, and maybe like an admin, maybe. And Bryn is a rock star. I love working with Bryn. She has really been able to help the legislature see that if you want a safe and effective program that really does what you want parts of Act 164 to do, we need a lot more staff. It's just not going to work. Plus, agencies have trepidation about working with us because of that federal funding status. You know what I mean? So, so we've been able to create a lot more positions, but I think we had to go fight for those. They didn't want to give them to us initially, at least, right? So, and hiring in the government context just takes so freaking long. Like, I wish we could have extended offers weeks ago, but everything takes time, you know, especially if somebody's moving from another state agency here. It just takes time, and we don't have time right now, you know, but it's just the world that we're living in. And so,
and it seems like, boy, basically you guys had a year to carve out this brand new market. That seems like a ton of work to do in a very short time frame.
You know, I think I certainly agree with you. I think it's hard to kind of conceptualize even time, generally speaking, with COVID. I can't even figure out, you know, time to begin with, let alone this job and how fast the last year has gone. But, you know, I think if folks understand that we literally had to build the nuts and bolts of the plane as we were trying to take off, and now we're trying to land it without real, you know, a good set of landing gear. You know, maybe they empathize. I don't know. I know that folks are anxious right now, and everybody's, you know, feeling it. So, yeah, you know, I think we've only missed one deadline, and that was that May 1st deadline. And we didn't think at points that we would even get there. So I think, yeah, we're still feeling comfortable with our work to date. It's only going to get better from here.
Well, that seems like a good point. Let's take 5 and we'll come back, and then we'll get into some of the nitty gritty here.
Okay.